Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're just giving time for more people to log in, and we'll be starting in a few minutes. Good evening again, and welcome. Well, hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Rashid.
Yes. Good. Yes, we can hear you. Good. Today's webinar is on building effective research collaborations, which we are jointly hosting as the KMA Research Committee and East Africa Medical Journal. We have two eminent speakers who will be introducing shortly, but first I want to acknowledge the presence of all our KMA National Executive and National Governing Council members joining us this evening. And now I will hand over to KMA President, Dr. Andrew Were, to make the welcoming remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rashid. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity first to appreciate all of you for taking time to join this important webinar, which is at the core of what we do as healthcare practitioners in this country, especially doctors. And also appreciate the KMA Research and Ethics Committee headed by convener Dr. Bonyo, who's joining us all the way from Australia, and all the panelists, Professor Kinyanjui, for taking time to actually join us today to talk on this important topic that I think is relevant today as it was even in the past in terms of taking KMA to the new heights where we want to go. So I know this is a series of webinars that have been planned, and EAMJ and the KMA Research and Ethics Committee. And I hope that we'll all gain from it and make it be a stepping stone as KMA seeks to be an ethics and research committee organization in partnership with the African Population Health and Research, the FHRC committee. So welcome. I hope you'll enjoy the webinar and you'll be able to apply what you learned today in terms of forming effective collaborations with other institutions that we need to engage with in terms of fostering research in the healthcare field. Thank you, and Karibu. Back to you, Dr. Rashid.
Thank you, Dr. Were. Today we have two eminent speakers, and sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Good. Now it's now my pleasure to introduce to you our two eminent speakers, Professor Sam Kinyanjui and Dr. Moses Alobo. A brief introduction of our good Professor Sam Kinyanjui. He's currently the head of training and capacity building at KEMRI-Wellcome Trust research program. He's also the director of Initiative to Develop African Research Leaders, IDEAL. He's also an associate professor at Nuffield Department of Medicine at Oxford University. To introduce to you, he has been involved in research for over 25 years, with his primary interest being immunity to malaria. At the international level, our professor has been a strong advocate for more funding of the African research, including drafting of the African Union Accra Declaration for Health Research in 2006. Also, the Bamako Call for Action on Research for Health in 2007, the Health Research and Innovation Strategy for Africa, HRISA 2018 to 2030. He was involved in the consultations with Wellcome Trust for other funders that led to the development of over £1 million British pound scheme to support research capacity building in Africa, ISA Deltas. Kenya has been a beneficiary of these funds through several research consortia based in Kenya, including the IDEAL, the Initiative to Develop African Research Leaders. Over the past 12 years, Professor Sam has focused more on building research capacity in Kenya and in Africa. He has raised and managed funding for capacity building of 2.5 billion Kenyan shillings as the primary recipient and 5 billion shilling as a co-recipient. This is highly commendable. With his funding, he has established a highly productive pipeline, the IDEAL program, for attracting, training, and retaining young Kenyans and Africans to research, providing high quality master's and PhD training, as well as nurturing emerging local research leaders. To date, the IDEAL program has provided research training to over 900 Kenyans, including 276 graduate interns. These are postgraduate diploma in health research methods, over 200 master's programs, and 105 PhD students. Importantly, most of these trainees are still doing research in Kenya and have attracted further research grants worth over 5 billion Kenyan shillings. A substantial number of IDEAL alumni are currently at the heart of Kenya's COVID-19 response, including leading in testing, modeling, transmission, genome sequencing, serosurveillance, and the ongoing AstraZeneca vaccine trial in Kenya. He sits in the advisory boards of over 15 programs and initiatives, including those of the WHO, Harvard University, Oxford University, and has supported the establishment of postgraduate training programs at local universities, including Pwani University Biosciences Research Center at Kilifi that offers bioinformatics master's course funded by the NIH Fogarty at Pwani University, and DAAD funded PhD in health management at Strathmore University. And he will today be talking about research collaborations with training institutions and institutions of higher learning. Karibu sana, Professor. Our second speaker. Our second speaker.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Beg your pardon?
Dr. Sam can present.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. One of the reasons of being asked to send your profile is that you expect people will only take a small bit and they end up taking a lot of it. But thank you very much for the introduction. I'm now going to share my screen. And Chavato, could you let me know whether coming through?
Yes, it's come through and it's on presenter mode. Thank you.
Thank you. So as you have heard, I'm the head of training at the KEMRI-Wellcome Research Program and also a director for the initiative to develop African research leaders, and I'm part of the Nuffield Department of Medicine at Oxford University. I had been given a bit of freedom to put my title, so it's a bit different from what was advertised in terms of collaborating specifically with the training institutions. And I just thought I should focus a bit more widely on getting the most out of research collaborations. A lot of what I'll be saying today, I'll be focusing more towards especially the younger clinicians who are thinking about taking up research as a career, and also who are wondering where to start in terms of getting collaborators. But of course, I expect that also in the audience, there'll be people who are older, or if you like, senior clinicians who might also benefit from the conversation, and who I believe will also bring some of their perspectives and experiences when we begin having the discussion. I also thought that before going on to the topic itself, it would be good to give you a bit of background about the KEMRI-Wellcome Research Program, in part so that you also know and have an idea of some of the institutions that you could collaborate with when you're thinking about research. Of course, there are others, for example, the African Population and Health Research Center, who are collaborators on this webinar. There is obviously the universities themselves, which also have a health research program that you could think about. The program is a collaboration between KEMRI, Oxford University, and the Wellcome Trust. And the first MOU was signed sometime back in 1989. We are housed in Kilifi, or the main campus is in Kilifi. And so you may often hear of KEMRI Kilifi. We're synonymous to the KEMRI-Wellcome Research Program. And we are housed in one of the KEMRI centers. For those who don't know, KEMRI has 12 centers. We are housed on one of them called KEMRI-CGMRC. So in case you see KEMRI-CGMRC, KEMRI-Wellcome Research Program, or here KEMRI-Kilifi, we are one and the same thing. That said, we have 3 hubs. We have an office in Nairobi at Lenana Road. We also have a site in Mbale, Eastern Uganda, where we're doing a lot of research on treatment of the sick child. Some of you may be familiar with the fluid management trials that were carried out in Uganda, and those were carried out in our hub. We also have an upcoming site in Haral in Eastern Ethiopia, and we have a presence in over 20 counties in Kenya and another 18 countries in Africa. Our staff outfit consists of 80 PhD level scientists, about 100 graduate research officers who have either a master's or an undergrad, and 600 support staff, including technicians and operational staff, field workers. And at any one time, we have roughly between 50 and 60 PhD students, about 30 master students. Currently, we don't have PhDs because they have just completed, but we'll be having about 20 to 25. And also because of Corona, we don't have attachments, but we would normally have another 20 or 30 or so attachees. We, at any one time, have about 150 research projects going on. And this we do together with over 300 different collaborators at individual and institutional level. And I've highlighted, obviously, because that's the topic of today. We publish over 200 publications per year, and also very much involved, not just in impacting on knowledge, but also on treatment guidelines. Many of you may be familiar with some of the work that we did, especially around malaria and now bacteria and other childhood illnesses, but also now moving on more to adult diseases and ill health. We also advise, or we have research that advises on interventions rollout, be it vaccines or any other programs. We are very much involved in health policy formulation, and again, I'll be mentioning a bit more about this. This is a simplified schema of the work we do. Our work is informed by research, the country's research priorities, generally the list of the diseases or ill health conditions that lead in morbidity and mortality. Initially, we were very well known for malaria research. We still continue with malaria research, but we've expanded our work to cover pretty much all the diseases. We are now just beginning to really enter into the non-communicable spaces, especially trying to understand whether early exposure to infection increases your subsequent risk of having non-communicable diseases. The area probably we aren't very much in is cancers. And also at any given time, if you looked at a given researcher at the program, they are either involved in one of these areas, either trying to understand the biology of the disease, they're trying to map and model the disease spread, they are trying to understand social determinants of health, trying to understand the implementation context, that's health systems research, and developing new interventions so that clinical trials, we have one of the best capacities for clinical trials in the country. And I want to focus on this slightly with regard to potential for clinicians who are interested in joining research. I think there is often a tendency to only think that clinicians will focus mainly, say, on clinical trials or bedside research, but in each of these domains of research, we have both clinicians and non-clinicians. We have clinicians who are involved in research ethics, we have clinicians who are involved in social science research, we have clinicians in epidemiology, quite a lot of clinicians in the health system research space, from governance to financing to human resource for health. And we also have researchers who are clinicians who have focused basically on understanding parasite biology and are now having groups, laboratory-based research groups. So the idea is that don't restrict yourself to thinking that you want to do the clinical trials or bedside research. There is a whole world open to you as a clinician, should you be interested in moving into research. We have a very good capacity building program. We have had a bit about it in the introduction that was given. We focus on attracting young Kenyan research, focus on providing high quality training and then retain those who we train. Also building a transformative research leadership space within the country. And so we have different schemes that focus on achieving these goals. Importantly, we have very high quality inputs that ensures and guarantees the quality of people that we generate. And Moses Olobo, who is the next speaker, will be talking a bit about the funding and the schemes with which we're able to underwrite the work that we are doing. And I would encourage, if you're interested, to really follow up on some of these opportunities. Currently, we are at the end of the funding cycle. We are hoping to start the next funding cycle from around January 2021, and we'll be advertising for positions. We offer them on very competitive basis, and we very much encourage clinicians to also look at taking up these opportunities. And just to give you just an example of the statistics, since 2008, we have had 106 PhD graduates. Currently, we have 52. And yours truly, Chavato, who is on this call, is one of our recent graduates. And in this big year, there are about 6 or 7 clinicians who are undertaking PhD training. In total, since 2008, we have had 26 clinicians. And by clinicians, I've taken people with MCHB, BVM, BDS, and also included BFAM. And we have had 26 of them undertake PhD. So we do have a lot of opportunities, both at the KEMRI-Wellcome Trust Research Program and across the programs that are being funded through the African Academy of Sciences and other funders and opportunities. Please, if you're interested, just keep looking at the different websites and apply as the opportunities arise. When we think about the options for clinicians, obviously I've already been talking about, if you like, the pure research and academic pathway. Some of you may say that's the area you want to go, but also we may be interested in looking at research product development. Someone like Moses Olobo is a good example of who took research and the product development path. You may be interested in implementation research. So you don't want to do research, but you want to work at the front or at the nexus of research and implementation through either government or non-governmental organizations. Or you may be interested in only doing research in periodically, in which case you can engage as a consultant once you have the right training. So coming now to the topic of today, research collaborations. This is a comment regarding Nobel Prize winners that Jeremy Farrar, the director of Wellcome Trust, made recently after Peter Ratcliffe, who is in the middle there, won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 2019. And the reason I put that picture is just show you that although Peter Ratcliffe was a winner, he's actually supported and has collaboration with a large number of people. He didn't know we hail him as an individual. Actually, his success is through a large number of collaborations. I'm going to expose the concept, the issue of research collaboration using the typical approach, which you say why, whom, when, what, and so forth. And I think the first question then you have to ask yourself is, why do you want to collaborate? What is the point of, what is the motivation? What are you looking for in collaboration? And the first thing really to say is avoid token collaboration. And token collaboration is very common in Africa. You have people who are looking for a clinician, or people who need a name or an African name or a researcher from developing countries or low and middle income countries, and they come to you with an already completed proposal and they say, do you mind adding your name here? We need a clinician. You have to think about, why are you looking at collaborating? There are many reasons. I've listed quite a number of them there. You may be looking for access to technology. Institutions like the KEMRI-Wellcome Trust Research Program has very good technology, but other institutions both here and internationally, you may want to look at sharing expertise. and more now, there's an emphasis in having multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary teams, and therefore it is important that you bring people with different capacities, or you join teams that have different capacities. Access research support system. How well you do your research often is not just determined by your own capacity and your own genius, or even having funding. It's also really determined by having a structure which is able to manage the money, which is able to procure staff, which is able to, if you like, recruit for you the staff that you're looking for. And so you do need a research system, and sometimes you may be looking to collaborate with institutions that have very good research support systems. You are looking at sharing resources, you're looking at expanding your networks, and by expanding your networks, expanding your capacity to do research. Again, sometimes looking at access and exchange to data, acquiring new skills, obviously, and knowledge by joining new teams or joining teams with different capacities, expanding your scope of research. And this is really important. Unfortunately, in Kenya, we tend to view science as a one-man show. And normally, globally, most of science, except probably in a few areas such as maths, where you can work as an individual trying to develop a new mathematical theory, normally with medical or health research, you're expected to really be collaborators. And of course, there are types of research where you cannot do alone anyway. If you want to do a large clinical trial, it's very unlikely that you'll be funded because you're incapable of doing it alone. And also sometimes you do this because you want to get the numbers. You don't have sufficient numbers at one site. And so you have a multi-site collaborative research in order to achieve the numbers that are required to get power for your research question. You're looking at also increasing training capacity. Core supervision and core training for students is often a major drive for collaboration between researchers. And in general, strengthening your research capacity. Then there's the issue of leveraging funding. One of the things that often people say to us when they come to our program is they say, you're very lucky that you have so much money. And we often say, no, it's not that lucky. We all have to compete like everyone else, but we increase our competitiveness by really working together. There's a very strong drive for collegiality and a very strong drive to try and work together. The sort of you have on your application is very key in determining sometimes whether you'll be funded or not. Not just because you have a grant, but because they will bring to the table extra capacity required, but they also bring to the table the experience and the kind of CVs that are required for you to win large-scale funding. So if you're really trying to get funding, especially when you're younger, it is very important that you are also collaborating with people who have a strong CV and a strong research profile. And again, who do you work with? And this is unfortunate, but it's true in any area. The sort of people you're collaborating with in themselves are capable of enhancing your own research profile. And so it's very important that you think about who you're going to collaborate with. And I just reiterate, as I said at the beginning of this slide, avoid token collaboration. Your collaboration really has to have a reason and a motivation that is very clear to you before you set off to look for collaboration. So with whom do you collaborate? So that picture there is Chavazzo with his supervisor and now postdoc supervisor, John Fraser. And the lab below there is where they carry out experiments using a sheep model to understand the impact of septicemia on the heart function. The reason we chose John Fraser as a collaborator is because of the quality of the output of research from his group. The advance we had to interest of in Stavato's research area. He's interested in septicemia and in understanding heart function, and also complementarity, the fact that we had mutual tests, and we also saw it as a mutual benefit in that Chavazzo obviously gets a PhD training, gets to bring a new type of skills and capacity which is lacking in the country. And at the time, obviously, he contributes to John Fraser's research group output. We also looked at the research environment, and we looked at the quality of colleagues that are within the John Fraser's group. The second area you have to look at is not just the research work, but also the researchers themselves. Look at their expertise, look at the intellectual value, and also look at their risks. It's very important to, if you come with a bit of background with who you're going to collaborate with, of who you're going to collaborate with, how do they collaborate, what kind of people are they? And you need to look at their capacity to do interpersonal relationship and to communicate with them in a clear and open manner. And then looking at their willingness to collaborate, what kind of professional ethos and culture they bring. And I want to emphasize again on the ethos and cultures, because sometimes people try to collaborate with across different, if you like, institutions, across different cultures, and there's often a clash of culture and a failure to understand each other. For example, with all due respect to our colleagues who work in the government, there's a very different ethos when you're working with the government than when you're working with the private sector. And if you don't understand each other, it creates tension and it creates frustrations. You're coming from the private sector, you want things to happen at a high speed. You're coming from the other side, from the government side, and you're saying, you know, there's no hurry. The government has always been here, will be here, and will be here long after your private sector is gone. So to hierarchy, and those sort of things really create they often create tensions and frustrations in collaborations. Then you need to look at the institution. What is the institutional interest? Does it fit your own institution's interest? And what kind of support do they have for collaboration? Is it to maneuver and navigate through the process of the putting together the collaboration, or do they have a support for developing collaborations? And what is the culture of the institution in managing collaboration, and how have their collaborations been in the past? Then the question is when? What are the opportunities to initiate collaborations? And again, this may sound obvious, but often people miss opportunities in conferences and meetings, and you know, we are sometimes too shy, or we're thinking that's a really high level person, that's Professor so-and-so, I can't talk to them. And I would really encourage clinicians and younger clinicians who are interested in collaboration, please feel confident to walk up to a person and say, that was a great talk, I'm really interested in the same area, how can we collaborate? Third-party introduction, really key. Talk to somebody who knows the sort of the person who you're targeting or the institution you're targeting to collaborate with. We have so many requests for collaboration, so sometimes when you just get an email from the call, it's much harder to really engage. But if I get, or you know, a potential collaborator gets an introduction from somebody they know or somebody they already collaborate with, they're more likely to start that engagement. And just visit an institution, go to the institution, meet the people in person, explain what it is you want. It's again very important that you think about what is it that you're bringing to the table and what you expect to get from the institution. Sometimes people will visit an institution that has high research capacity, like ours, and often they'll say, "Oh, Prof, we should collaborate." Yeah, we'll collaborate, but it's not clear exactly what they want to collaborate on. The other important thing is that start thinking about collaborations when you are ready to when you're concentrating your research. Don't wait until you're through with the ideas to start your for collaborators. People don't like being in the last minute. Then how do you manage expectations? And on this slide, I've put two sides of managing expectation. One is, if you like, the more formal and legal aspects. What are the things that you need to think about when you're starting a collaboration? You need to think about issues around authorship and credit. Who gets the credit for the work that has been done? You need to think about research accountability. Who is accountable for what aspects or what areas of the research that you're collaborating in? You need to think about and agree on intellectual property ownership. But it's very important to point out here that maintaining patents in itself is quite expensive. And so you also need to think about the cost of maintaining, applying for, getting registration, and maintaining intellectual property. Often people just imagine that it's just easy to have a patent. If you do not maintain it, if you don't take the cost, then it's going to lapse, and it will be an open, it will be open for use by anybody. So all those need to be discussed. think about data sharing and retention, be aware of what moratoriums may be put up on the data sharing, who owns the data, where will be stored, how can you access it. The same issue about ownership of samples, issues around transfer of materials between labs or between yourself and the other institution. Again, this needs to be agreed on right upfront when you're starting your collaboration. The same thing with facility use will be funded in such a way that your equipment, that equipment is going to one of the collaborating institutions. And again, there has to be agreement that it should be open for use by all members of the network or the collaborative project. And so all these are very key to have thought about upfront. And also think about your exit strategy. Exit in terms of at the end of the project, but also exit in the event that the collaboration is not working, because that sometimes is when it becomes messy and the divorce, and that's when you hear people, saying they were exploited or they were cheated out of something, or something was stolen from them. So all these have to be really clear. But these are the formal, legal, on paper type of expectation. But on the other hand, I think there are some really key aspects that ensure the success of a collaboration. This is integrity, honesty, openness in the way you are dealing with each other. We all have to have trust. It's not just about the other part being trustworthy. We ourselves also have to be trustworthy. And then communication, ensuring that everybody within the collaboration is aware of all aspects of the collaboration and they're up to date with what is going on within the collaboration. And then very key, acknowledging the contribution of every person at all the points where the work that is being done is discussed. Whether it is in formal publications, whether it is in conferences, or even just in small workshops, or wherever you're talking about the work you're doing, make sure to acknowledge the collaborators that you're collaborating with, and vice versa, of course, they should acknowledge you. Without this, and without having really agreement around this expectation, what happens is that people come through collaborations because there was just a good feeling. And at the end, when push comes to shove, and when we start talking about sharing data or sharing credit, that's when the fight really begins. So it's really important to sort this out upfront. And with that, just to say there is a lot of materials that you can read on practice for developing collaborations, and these are just examples of further things. But if you just go into the internet, there will be a lot of materials that can help you on developing research collaborations. Thank you. Over to you, Chair, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kinyanjui. Thank you for the informative and insightful presentation. We'll have a discussion and Q&A at the end of the session end. So please keep typing your questions to Professor Kinyanjui in the Q&A box. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Moses Alobo. Dr. Moses studied medicine at the University of Nairobi and later public health at the University of Birmingham. He was awarded the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine Executive Global Health Leadership Leadership Fellowship, in 2019. The Archbishop Desmond Tutu African Leadership Fellowship in 2014. The EU Contact Point Network for Young African Scientists Fellowship in 2007. And the British Chevening Scholarship in 2005. He has worked for GSK, Hoffman La Roche, the drug company, and Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative. Dr. Moses is a social entrepreneur in addition to implementing quality health management and research projects in more than 30 different countries in Africa. That's highly commendable. He delivers to patients the much needed health programs and health research grounded in best practice by using evidence-based medicine to solve current public health problems. Grand Challenges Africa at the African Academy of Sciences, and he will be talking to us about research collaborations and grand challenges. Karibu, Dr. Moses.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Amin, for that very kind introduction. So just checking that you can hear me okay, Dr. Amin, before I proceed.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear, Doctor.
Brilliant, thanks. Thank you, Professor Kinyanjui, for that very good introduction. I am going to be now focusing on the how. How do you individually change yourself to be a brilliant research collaborator? And my first statement is you can only collaborate where you've got something to offer, okay? So, I found it. Okay, so as Prof said right there, research collaboration is about research interests. Now, in this particular slide, what I'm attempting to do here is just to show you a summary of myself, because when you are meeting someone for the first time, for example, you've got to introduce yourself and introduce yourself very quickly and successfully, to the extent that if there is anything of common interest, they can be able to pick it up and have a discussion with you. So whether it's in a conference, you know, a workshop, or even if it's through email, you should be able to quickly introduce yourself. Of course, there are many ways of doing it. In this particular case, I am using pictures. So meaning that each and every of these pictures, if there's any that you are actually connecting with, then we can always have a discussion about those particular things. So I am at the African Academy of Sciences. I run a program called Grand Challenges Africa, which basically takes research and then wraps them around to build innovations that can be able to transform the health sector and other developmental challenges that face the African continent. And our focus is usually on product development and not just research. How do we do this at Grand Challenges Africa? We support ideas that are big, bold, innovative, impactful, scalable, and sustainable. If I was to give an example, I do have a researcher in South Africa who's come up with a dipstick that can be able to reduce 24-hour urine in pregnant women and give reliable results in 1 minute instead of having to admit the patient for a diagnosis of preeclampsia. So those are the kind of things that we're actually looking at in Grand Challenges Africa. And our purpose is to take those particular kind of ideas, transition them to scale, and then scale them to the extent that we can be able to change clinical guidelines or any other guidelines of practice on the African continent and indeed the globe. So we divide them into 3 tiers. I won't go through those, but we'll come back to them. So far, just to put everything into perspective before we now get into the crux of the discussion, in Grand Challenges Africa, we've got around 110 projects equivalent to the one I've just described to you. And we have done them in such areas as maternal and neonatal child health, antimicrobial resistance, water and sanitation. We've got 2 rounds that we've done under transition to scale. Food security and nutrition. Actually, we had our decision committee just yesterday choosing 10 projects. We've got 12 projects under COVID-19 and a data sciences call with a focus on MNCH again. and then 2 calls that we have done on drug discovery, giving us a total of 16 researchers. There are actually many ways of getting your collaborations going. I just need to mention a few that we have within the African Academy of Sciences under the AISA platform. One of the bigger ones is called Deltas, Developing Excellence in Leadership Training and Science, of which Professor Sam Kinyanjui is one of our directors. And in this particular one, as you can see, there is quite a bit of intra-Africa collaboration. So there is usually an assumption that, intra-Africa collaboration is very minimal, but there's quite a bit of it. And we keep finding more and more groups that are working together to build collaborations on the African continent. So in this particular one, there are 11 networks covering 23 African countries with more than 50 organizations. And then there's another way of entering into collaborations, especially if you're a disease specialist or you have interests in a certain disease area. This is the Human Hereditary and Health in Africa, or H3 Africa. Where we are currently looking at genomics research. Again, there's quite a bit of south to south collaboration and also south to north collaboration, and we will be coming to some of these issues as we go along. Another way of doing it is to represent a country. So, for example, my colleague at the African CDC, Dr. Sophonias Tesema, runs what's called the Africa Pathogen Genomics Initiative Lab Network. And in this particular one, labs are chosen that can be able to represent their country in this Pathogen Genomics Initiative. So when we are considering connections to various different things under Grand Challenges Africa, one of the interesting ones, because we focus on innovations, is to try and have an innovator connected to as many components of an innovation ecosystem as much as possible. So, for example, have them connected to capital, have them connected to industry, have them connected to technology and commercialization partners, research organizations, research universities, governments, and talent, where talent means either good researchers or human resource talent. In this demonstration here is our first 64 projects and how they are connected to various different entities. So you can see, for example, connections to industry on the African continent, we are still doing very badly, where, of course, we can always improve. And then this is not so much as to tell you what type of research studies are there, but to mention that there are various different ways in which you can collaborate. You can actually collaborate at the apex of this particular pyramid in systemic reviews and meta-analysis, or you could even collaborate at the bottom of this particular pyramid in in vitro or test tube research. So if you're seated in, Homa Bay District Hospital, County Hospital, or if you're in University of Nairobi in a medical department, or if you're in Aga Khan University, private institution, what are some of those things that you just need to be aware of if you need to kickstart a research collaboration? I've put down a few thoughts here, 5 different areas, questions that you need to start asking yourself. Safety, governance, clinical care, quality assurance, and needs outcome. Because when a pharmaceutical company comes to you what we used to walk around with was something called a clinical trial evaluation sheet. And when we come with that sheet, it in a way, assesses your unit according to these various different things that are on this particular slide. So I won't go through them, but just mention that some of them are quite critical. What most clinicians usually focus on is under needs and outcomes, local population disease profile. So, you would hear clinicians saying, we've got very many patients, who qualify for this particular drug that you want to actually come and assess, but they forget or, do not put in mind that there are many other things that the assessment usually focuses on. Things to do with safety, your risk management profile, do you do clinical audits, what's your staff appraisal, how are your facilities and equipment, what kind of skills, knowledge and experience does your staff have? And then sometimes, even more importantly, what kind of research support services do you have? How is your finance? How is your procurement? Because we have seen research projects that actually delay the whole consortium for the simple reason that they could not be able to access blood agar, for example. So there are definitely very many ways of actually delivering this as a unit. Would you want to, become a research leader and then after that build, some postdoctoral leaders or PhDs and masters and research assistants below you? Or are you a master's student and you'd like to plug yourself into such kind of an organization? Or on the other hand, are you an epidemiologist or a social scientist or an oncologist, and you're looking for, like a global organization where you can be able to offer something, and they're looking for maybe a physician, or are you a data scientist that you can be able to provide this particular service? Because as I said at the beginning, you will only enter into a collaboration if you've got something to offer. So when we talk about something to offer, and again, if I was just to focus on that particular person who's probably in, Eldoret, Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, if you are to join a collaboration, of course, there are some simple things that you will need to have for people to be interested in you. So for example, question is, do you have a patient group or a series? That will be important to a collaboration. Do you have a patient registry? Have you established a cohort? Or do you have some archived samples that can be important contribution towards, a certain collaboration? Or are you a member of a demographic surveillance site? Do you have a rich database? So just data that you have, conversion of patient records that you have over the last, 5-10 years. Or on the other hand, if it's not about records, it's about methods and methodologies. Is there a new method of doing research that you have, or a new technology? Or would you like to extend a certain geographical, as a certain research to our current geography so that we can be able to find out more about ourselves? So case in point, when I was talking about H3A, you remember the Human Genome Project. Genomic research was not being done on the African continent. So H3A came out to actually try and answer that particular question. Or are you good and do you have a wet lab to the extent that you can be able to provide this particular kind of a service, or new equipment, new imaging techniques? Or do you want to localize some global methods? Case in point here is that when Glopida and WHO came up with the research priorities for the globe for COVID-19 last year, what our group did is that we took those particular research priorities and then localized them to the extent to try and find out, do these global priorities make sense for Africa? And lo and behold, there were some global priorities that did not make sense in Africa. And therefore, we ended up with a research collaboration, including the Africa CDC and WHO from. Or are you proposing a new process change? So how do you make yourself present in a collaboration? Of course, you have to publish or be a member of scientific advisory boards, do conference presentations, workshops, or have regional representation for global projects, participate in funding applications, of course, or just be a peer reviewer in journals, editorial boards. Sometimes it's just down to your communications team for you to, put your name out there. And then some little bit of a tidbit here in terms of correspondence. Do not be afraid to write to experts out there or people who have published in, papers in, areas that you have interest in. There's always an email associated with authorship. So feel free to actually write and ask questions. Of course, when you write, don't say, I want to be a collaborator. Write to ask, a pertinent question about what you have seen within the paper so that you can be able to create some form of interest with that particular group. So for example, to say, the way your team analyzed that particular paper, it is interesting to us, we would like to learn more. Is it possible that you connect me to your statistician so that they can be able to just explain what they did because it was not clear in the paper. And then of course, from there, you can always have discussions, continue discussions, and build interest as you go along. And then finally from me, be ready to deliver your end of the bargain if you eventually end up in collaboration, so that you're not just there in the collaboration by name, because believe it or not, people who usually do well in a collaboration are the ones that are picked again or recommended to other groups. As we say within my team, excellence breeds sustainability. So therefore, if you want your research to actually be sustainable moving forward, you need to be excellent in your delivery. And then, as the preachers say, lastly, sometimes you end up lasting for longer. Your bio, that bio that you write out for yourself when you either presenting or sending it out to various different groups. Please just make sure that it actually says what you want it to say. So just before this meeting, what I did is that I took my bio and then plugged it into a word cloud, software freely available on the internet. And lo and behold, I was shocked, and then again, not so shocked, because what the word cloud threw out for me is that I am a health research manager, as you can see in this particular slide. So I would encourage you to actually just attempt the same and then see what your bio tells you about yourself, literally saying what your bio is telling other people that you are. So here, of course, this says to me that I need to go check my bio again so that I can be able to write it in such a way that it reflects exactly which kind of interests I currently have. So thanks again, and back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Alobo, for the informative and exciting presentation. We're now going to have a 15-minute Q&A session, and I'll now hand over the meeting to the moderator for that session, my colleague at the KMA Research Committee, Dr. Kiplangat Sigei. Dr. Sigei?
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid. Hope you can hear me okay. So first of all, I want to thank the two presenters, Prof. Kinyanjui and Dr. Alobo, for those excellent talks. I think in terms of Q&A, we did have one question put in the Q&A tab that I think, Prof, you already answered. But I think it's one of those, very interesting issues related to collaboration, where we talk of token collaboration. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything on top of what you put in the chat.
No, I saw the question there, and maybe it's essentially that, especially where there are certain requirements by funders or legal requirements, you may find that people have already prepared, and let me be very clear that this can just happen in international, or it even happens locally. People have prepared their proposals, they have prepared their grant applications, and then they realize that they need a person with a particular research profile. They need an African researcher, they need someone with clinical background, they need somebody with an experience of managing large grants. And so they quickly come to you and say, do you mind being on this proposal? And the challenge, obviously, for that is that you haven't had time to engage with the process of developing the proposal, conceptualizing, and most likely you will not be involved in the execution, and you have little control. And so two things can happen. In some cases, the research doesn't work, and your name is on it, and if it goes wrong, then you're just as accountable as the people who were completely involved. The second part is that because you haven't had time to really think about it, you really are not very clear on what your rights or what benefits you'll accrue or how you'll be accredited within that proposal. And when it's been funded and everything, is when you start realizing that you are getting the raw end of the deal. So it's very important that you have, you engage in the collaborations that you are involved in. At times, and I know it's a very, common practice where it's very easy to blame any institution that has higher, if you like, a power relationship and say, oh, they were exploitive. But it's because people didn't even bother to read. And so they agreed to do something. And it's only afterwards that they realized they were getting the end of the deal. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Prof. That's really something for everyone to pay attention to when get into collaborations. I see Prof. Okeo, your hand up, and you've put in some points in the chat box related to opportunities of COVID pandemic and securing and assuring integrity. Probably that was directed to Lobo, but maybe you can unmute and speak.
Yes, thank you. I want to start first. Can I have a confirmation that my voice projection is adequate?
Yes, it's perfect.
Yeah, so I just want to appreciate Professor Kinyanjui and Dr. Lobo for excellent presentations, touching on interest to me personally, but also professionally for some of the institutions that I work for. Not very long ago, somebody posted a post on one of our professional networks saying that treat all researchers fraudulent until proved otherwise. I would love somebody to just address that particular question or comment. And secondly, in this era, you have situations where you have multi-country and multi-site collaborations with tons and tons of authors. And if you were to put everybody there, it would fill the paper. So is there a systematic way of documenting the authors in a way that doesn't rob anybody of everything and still makes it a sensible presentation? And thirdly, it's been said that the COVID-19 pandemic has provided a great opportunity for growth in collaborations. Why is that so, and what are the opportunities that listeners can tap into to understand that collaboration and leverage it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Okeo. I think the questions are quite broad, and perhaps maybe both presenters could take a turn to respond.
Yeah, so thanks again, Prof. Okeo, for those questions. I guess one of the major things that you actually sell as a researcher is integrity and honesty, to the extent that if you are to publish something, that particular publication must be repeatable and of course must also have some form of biological plausibility, as it were. So it is very difficult for someone to actually just cook up things and then publish. They may do it, but eventually some of those ills or wrongs always catch up with you, especially if your research is actually not repeatable. And when that happens and you're blacklisted, even if it's by one funder or one research collaboration, your career will just as well have been ruined. So anyone in the research field tries as much as possible not to taint their integrity and also taint their honesty in any kind of way. And then on research collaborations, big research collaborations, there's always a question around authorship and who goes into the authorship list and then who goes into the acknowledgement list. So, I mean, there are many ways of actually dealing with this because there are very clear guidelines about who qualifies as an author. And then everyone else actually goes into acknowledgement list. But if you're a research group, or even if you're not, you can always formulate yourself into one so that it is the research group actually publishing. Even if you're 120 people, you will see publications with even 200 people in that particular publication. So what I'm now saying is that it will be the research group publishing, but somewhere in the appendix will be a list of members of the research group. And then finally from me on COVID-19 and opportunities for research. Now there's a lot of information that we still do not know about COVID-19 on the African continent. I mean, if I was just to bring out one of them is around how come the African continent was not as affected as other continents by COVID-19. Will the new variants affect us more compared to other, continents? So this particular question could be looked at in various different ways, whether you're a social scientist, whether you're a lab technician, whether you're a pharmacist, you do antimicrobial resistance, molecular biology. I mean, there's quite a bit in there. And there are groups out there that are interested in actually finding out more about this particular question. Now, the other thing that we probably did not say in our presentation is that please, if you were to, in a way, compete for funding, have your research proposal ready before the announcement of the funding opportunity. And it's counterintuitive, but the interesting point here is that research proposal announcements are usually open for 40 days, 30 days, sometimes, which is a little bit too short for you to even put together a collaboration in time to put in the protocol. So therefore, so the groups that always win are the ones that will have already written out their proposals, already formulated their collaborations, and are just waiting for the opportune time. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Moses. Yeah, so maybe to touch on multi-site and multi-country collaborations, I think the key thing here to be aware of is especially the issues of legal jurisdiction and what impact or what implication there is when you're trying to do research across countries. And normally when you're doing this sort of multi-site and multi-country, these are very large, often very large collaborations. For example, we are currently doing the RTSS malaria vaccine rollout across multiple countries. And the thing you need to be aware is that this, in terms of your timelines, you have first to dedicate or allocate much longer lead-up period than you would normally within country. Often you have to make sure that clear the legal requirements in those countries, the ethics requirements in those countries, the science reviews in each of those countries. Often you require that each of those in each of the countries that these are approved. If it's poison and pharmacy boards in the different countries, if you're doing a drug clinical trials, you have to be aware of all those challenges. The second challenge, of course, you get is the challenge of communication and movement between those different countries. There are countries that you would want to work in, but which physically becomes sometimes very difficult. You have to really be aware of the issues on the ground, because on paper, what happens sometimes, we want to skim over some of the challenges we face on the ground because there is funding. You know, and just to give you a very quick example, we are required to collaborate with less resource countries, and we've chosen to collaborate with Niger. And it turns out that the embassy of Niger, if you need a visa, you have to go to Addis Ababa, even if you're in Kenya. And the timing for the flights and going to Addis and all that is not concordant. So it means that you have to plan for a week or two just to go there. And obviously this is something you may not be aware until you start talking about collaborations. So you need to be aware of the context-specific challenges that are likely to create differences in the speed at which you are able to execute the project. The other aspect you need to be aware of course, is the cultural differences that I was talking about. You need to understand the way and the ethos that different people are. For example, you'll be surprised, although we normally say we are all Africans, when you start dealing with Francophone African compared to Anglo-African, we are quite different. And you can see it even in meetings, the way we express ourselves. We come from the British side, we smile and we're a bit polite. The French side, they're a bit more direct and aggressive, and that already can take aback the Anglophone researchers. So some of those are aspects that you need to be aware of. Then maybe coming to opportunities for COVID pandemic, let me just say, as Moses is saying, there's actually surprisingly quite a lot of money being poured towards COVID-19 research, but they are doing it very quickly because every funder wants to be involved, and they want to be involved now because they also want that if they're not involved now, eventually somebody will solve the problem and now they will lose the credit. So you do need to have your questions ready and ready to go as soon as the calls are made. On the issue of securing integrity, I said before, you do have the formal structures. You need to ensure that those are foolproof. And on the other hand, as I said, get a background understanding of the person or the institution you're going to work with. Ask other people and their experiences. The more senior researchers will often have collaborated across with some of the people. The space for some of these diseases are actually very small in terms of the people involved. So someone else will know the person you're trying to collaborate with. So just get a sense of what kind of people they are. Then there's a question of individuals wishing to do research. What are venues getting funding from? The African Academy of Sciences, as Moses said, is quite a number of them, but also on the internet now, if you just search, there'll be a whole set of potential calls. The thing to say is that it's not automatic. In fact, the hit rate or the success rate, even for relatively successful researchers, is in the range of about 30%. And so you need not to be frustrated or disappointed when you get negative feedback. That is the life of a researcher. So that's something that you have to be really aware. And the final question I just want to deal with, plug out, and then I'll hand back over, is the issue of novice researchers on protecting intellectual property and registration. Let me first say, if you're working within an institution, it's really important that you understand the institutional intellectual property policies. The majority of institutions, the default is that if you're employed within an institution, then the intellectual property belongs to the institution. And this is something that sometimes surprises people. For example, even your lab book, you don't live with your lab book. The lab book remains, is a property of the institution, research institution. The data that you gather actually does not belong to you. It belongs to the institution. You also have to be aware about, and we didn't talk about this, Moses, but open access is a huge drive towards open access, especially with funders who are doing it for charity, not obviously in a private sector. That's different because you are, but for example, the Wellcome Trust or the government of Kenya, if they give you money, they're giving you money so that you can generate knowledge that will impact on the citizens' health. And so you are required to actually make your data and make your products open access. And this is really important for people to understand. The other thing is that, as I said, please take time to understand the issue of intellectual property. Not every idea you have is necessarily protectable or even need to be protected. And you actually do need to bring out most of your ideas out there so that you're recognized, so that you publish, so that other people can also look at them. And that is the way you build your ability. I've often seen people even at master's level or even at postgraduate diploma level who are scared. They're saying, I want to protect my, and you're saying, no, this is not the point at which you're protecting a simple research project. So I think that's important to understand. And I think with that, just hand over back to the chair.
Yeah, thanks so much, Prof. And of course, earlier on, Dr. Alobo, for that detailed explanation on some of these pertinent issues. I think we may be kind of running out of time, but there's one question here that I think is very, very important for all of us. You know, the issue of research sometimes really boils down to the funding, and we know very much that African governments in general, of course, underfund research, especially in healthcare. And, you know, despite all the huge burden, all the statistics, you know, create a needed urgency to kind of get more funding locally. And I want to kind of broaden that question and ask also, what can we do to create sustainability? Because some of the collaborations, we tend to sometimes depend a lot on either northern partners or any other partners. So how do we create more urgency in our governments, and how do we sort of create sustainability so that the collaborations are a lot more homegrown, a lot more intra-Africa, as Dr. Alobo was sharing?
Okay, maybe I can go first.
Maybe you can go first, yeah.
Yeah, let me just answer first by saying one of the saddest moments I've had in recent while, and I don't mind being quoted because this is something that is very close to my heart, as you have heard from my introduction, is when the Minister of Education, and normally most of us stop there, but it's supposed to be the Minister of Education, Science and Technology, said, you must be stupid to wait for the government to invest 2% of GDP as per the agreement from the Accra Declaration and the different communiques and declarations that we have had. You must be very stupid as a scientist to wait for the government to invest for you to invent or for you to do research. And that was very sad because that is supposed to be the minister who is championing our funding. And so we try, and we are trying to use the different organizations, for example, the African Academy of Sciences, including even our bilateral funders such as the Wellcome Trust, to just put pressure and say, look, we can only put so much. These bilateral funders and donors can only put so much, but the government has to take that responsibility. And so in a sense, I'm pushing back this is sort of a challenge to even the group here, because obviously, in terms of health, doctors are the big voice. As we, say solidarity forever, or I can't remember which song it is normally for the doctors. Let's also push that there's more funding for research, and that is the only way we are going to have sustainability. So we need more voices supporting us in making that noise. And so I'm kind of pushing back this challenge to the group here, because you're really key in terms of the perception as to who leads research and health research in this country. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to agree with Prof. Kinyanjui there, that everyone's got to do their part. It's a tough work trying to raise money out of the government to actually support research. But if I was just to share some two events, at some point when I was seated on the board of KEMRI, we managed to attract or just put aside 200 million from the government to support KEMRI funds. The challenge was how to maintain that figure, because anytime there was a budgetary deficit, one of the first things that was chopped was actually this amount, which makes research support be very, very tough. And then another example is after visiting, various different visits to Ministry of Health, 4 different ministers, four different health ministers later, we managed to do a cabinet paper that actually focuses on grand challenges Kenya, really trying to say, can the Kenyan government put aside a pot of money where innovators in healthcare or other developmental challenges can be going to, and then start focusing on Kenyan problems as they do their research. So how it ended up is that yes, there was interest. We were even happy we reached that area, but eventually we did not secure any funding. We were told we'll probably do it in the next financial year. And of course, as you can imagine, in the next financial year, we had another new health minister. So again, we had to start from scratch. So it's a tough job, but we will keep at it until at a time when we can be able to secure funding for research. Thanks again, Chair.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Prof. and Dr. Lobo. Indeed, it is a grand challenge. That will continue to be something that we need to continuously push for. I think maybe at this point, we've tried to answer as many as possible, but because of time, we may want to stop there and thank, of course, the speakers for supporting the Q&A session, and also for all the attendees for sharing their questions. I think at this point, I'll hand over to the Kenya Medical Association Secretary General, Dr. Kigondu, to come in and give closing remarks and a vote of thanks.
Dr. Kigondu.
You're on mute.
Dr. Kigondu, do you hear us? Well, it seems Dr. Kigondu is out of reach. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kigondu?
I think Dr. Kigondu is
stepped out.
Not, he stepped out a bit. Yeah, Dr.
Okay,
Otara, you want to say something on behalf of the executive to the speaker?
Yeah, probably on behalf of the Kenya Medical Association, I really want to extend our gratitude for hosting, for the presenters of today's activity, Professor Kinyanjui and Alobo. It's been a pleasure listening to you, and really, as our president said, for bringing in the issues about collaborations in research. You've really been very clear, given us very good direction. And as our mandate as Kenya Medical Association is to engage our membership in building practice
best practices, research, management, and all the things that I think Lobo and Professor Kinyanjui have alluded to. It has been a pleasure, and really thank you so much, Dr. Obonyo, Professor Okeyo, Professor, our convener from Eldoret, Professor Onditi, and the entire KMA membership, and all the guests who are attended today. We really want to appreciate, and we believe that this series of lectures or webinars and interactions are going to continue and strengthen our resolve and finesse in research. Without much ado, I really want to wish you all a good evening. Thank you so much, and welcome next time again.
Thanks, everyone. Our next webinar in the medical publishing series will be in August. So hope to see you all then. Good evening and bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Good evening.